not going to deal with the issue of the repeal of the Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment was the amendment to the Constitution that was passed in 1983, which gave primacy, or sorry, equal respect to the life of the unborn, to the life as to the life of the mother. And there's a campaign now to have that repealed, to permit abortion legislation to be enacted. Okay, somebody here wants to talk about that. Go ahead, yeah.
My name is Sarah O'Rourke. I'm a member of People Before Profit, but I'm also a member of a new group in Dún Laoghaire called Repeal the Eighth Dún Laoghaire that was formed shortly after the marriage referendum, because I think we have to talk about it in terms of equality. And the marriage referendum was a huge step forward for equality, but many of us felt that we shouldn't stop there and we need to keep going to win equality for women. Because the issue is equality, and the issue is equal access to healthcare. Because if you are a man and you go to hospital, you have say over the procedures that are available to you. If you are a woman and you are pregnant and you are in hospital, you don't have the same say over what happens to you and the choices available to you. That's just one part of it. It's also about access to your reproductive health choices and all the other accompanying choices when it comes to women's bodily autonomy. And I think it's time to move on this, and not in a hypothetical way. I think it's time that all the candidates and all the parties give firm commitments. And I know, Vincent, you're the one asking the questions, but I am interested, and many of us are interested in hearing, when are people and when are candidates and when are parties going to call a referendum on the Eighth Amendment if elected? And I'd like to know, will they do it in 2016? And secondly, I'd like to know, as I'm sure lots of people would, will it be a red line issue for people?
Okay, Cormac, can I go to you? Fianna Fáil's position on this is it wants to avoid the issue. That's principally Fianna Fáil's position, a principled, courageous position.
No, no, it's not avoiding the issue. It's just in terms of the manifesto. I think you're referring to the recent interview, and you know, it recognises that it is a very sensitive subject. It comes up at every election, and there are very differing views on it. Fianna Fáil will have a debate internally on it, and we're going to see after that debate. Why hasn't the debate taken place?
Fianna Fáil has had 5 years for internal debate now to think about what it stands for. How come 5 years isn't enough for you to make up your mind on this issue?
Well, no, I think the party have been clear that in our manifesto, it's not going to be contained in it. We're not going to
Why not?
Well, that's...
Why not tell us which way or the other are you going to, do you stand?
Well, for me personally...
No, the party.
No, the party have... Well, that's up to the members to decide. The members have to debate that issue. Are you happy because with there are differing views, as in most parties. There are differing views on the subject.
And specifically, why is Fianna Fáil opposed to allowing the people of the country a decision on whether to repeal the Eighth Amendment or not? What's wrong with allowing the people to decide?
Fianna Fáil is not against, you know, allowing a debate on the issue.
No, I didn't say anything about a debate. What's wrong with why is Fianna Fáil opposed to allowing the people to decide on this issue again?
I don't see us being opposed to it. That's, you know, okay. What they...
Why isn't Fianna Fáil in favour of allowing the people to decide on this issue again?
Well, Fianna Fáil have said that it's not going to bring forward repealing...
Tell us why Fianna Fáil isn't in favour of allowing the people to decide on this issue again.
Well, there's a wide ranging of opinion in the party, and I would say that is ultimately it.
And it can't make up its
mind.
No,
because it's a conscience issue. We've had this. We had this before last year as well in terms of
what's the conscience issue in allowing people to decide? Where's the conscience issue there?
Well, no, that's what the issue. That's where it stems from.
No. What is the conscience issue in allowing the people to decide? No,
there's no conscience issue there.
So what you said was a conscience issue.
No, the subject matter is a conscience issue, and that's where it stems from. But Fianna Fáil itself, in terms of the manifesto you've asked, in terms of the manifesto, it says it's not going to bring forward repealing.
And you won't tell us why. But anyway, okay, Carol, yeah.
Well, I say this as the only person on the panel who has been pregnant or is likely to get pregnant at any time soon. I wasn't old enough.
Frank is hoping.
I wasn't old enough to vote in the 1983 amendment, and that was when the life of a zygote, of a fetus, was equated with the life of a grown woman, a woman who may have children, who may have a family dependent on her. I think the hypocrisy of not allowing this to go to the people as soon as possible shows from a lot of our political parties at the moment. All people are asking for is a vote. Okay, so opinion polls have shown that the vast majority of people in Ireland are actually pro having some sort of abortion allowed in various circumstances. Now, whether that would be up to 12 weeks or 20 weeks or whatever occasion, that has to be decided by legislation. But it doesn't have to be in our constitution. We really, really need to have that referendum, and people can vote whichever way they want, but we really need the people to be able to speak at this stage. It's been a long time coming, and every day 12 women travel to the UK to terminate pregnancies in secrecy and in crisis. And what it is, it's actually just putting cruelty on top of a crisis. That's what we're doing. We're not stopping it. There are no lives being saved here, nothing. It is just crisis upon cruelty upon more crisis. That's what's happening.
Okay. Shane, do you want to get involved?
I suppose just to answer that question without waffle, Sinn Féin supports the repeal of the 8. I was very proud of my party to take that position following our debate and a number of motions around the issue at our last Ardesh.
But the question is, somebody in the audience is asking, when would you propose, if you have a say in when this referendum should take place?
I think the only honest answer I could say is I actually don't know when. We have 2 red line issues going into the election, and they are to abolish the water charges and abolish property tax.
And that's it?
2 red line issues.
Those are the only red line issues?
2 red line issues.
So all the cuts to social programmes, that's not a red line issue for Sinn Féin?
Well, Vincent, and I know one of my colleagues put it to you last week, had you read our alternative budget document?
Yes, I have.
Yes, I did. But I'm glad you have.
You said the red line issues, only 2 red line issues, and they don't include, for instance, restoration of the cuts to social programmes.
Well, we've shown in our alternative budget for the last 4 years how we would.
It's interesting that the only red line issues are those 2 issues, water charges and the repeal of the 8th Amendment. Very interesting.
Look historically in all the promises that people got in 2011, and they've all been broken. We are saying 2 things that we will definitely do in government. Repeal the 8 is part of our policy. It's our stance to repeal the 8. And that was the question asked.
And the other is water charges.
Does Sinn Féin support the repeal of the 8? Sinn Féin reports the repeal of the 8.
And you'll definitely support that, and you'll definitely support the removal of the water charges. That it? That's what you just said, wasn't it?
2 red line issues.
Yeah, 2 red line issues, and everything else isn't a red line issue.
Well, of course it is.
You said only 2 red line issues.
I don't mean of course it is.
You said that's what you just said.
We have 2 red line issues, but moving
there you go.
to
Everything else is up for grabs.
No, it's not. In an Ireland of equals, in a fairer Ireland, repealing.
It's not a red line issue. Not a red line issue. According to yourself, it's not a red line issue. Oisín, do you want to say? Does the Green Party have a red line issue? Or a green line issue?
On the issue of repealing the 8th Amendment, our party's had a debate on that and has decided that we are in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment. My own position is that I think that abortion should be safe and legal and rare. And I think that it is. I agree with Carol. It is an uncomfortable situation with men discussing abortion, and there are many women in this room, and possibly some of them will have their own experiences, or with pregnancy, or with miscarriage, or with abortion.
Okay, is there anybody here who is against the repeal of the 8th Amendment, or against the people being given a choice to repeal the 8th Amendment? Okay, we'll get a microphone to you.
I would just like to say he is not actually talking for every woman in this room. I'm pro-life, and I'm very strong supporter in it. And I think he should just speak for himself and not for everybody else.
Who's that?
The last chap that was just there.
Well, I didn't think he was speaking for anybody else.
He was talking about the women in the room, that he was supporting the idea that they want a safe journey to London.
Okay, and why are you...
He wasn't speaking personally for me.
Okay, why are you opposed to the Irish people having a choice on whether to remove the 8th Amendment from the Constitution or not?
Well, I'm speaking for the children who can't speak for themselves, the ones that end up in buckets, armless, limbless, everything else. And as a very strong supporter of pro-life, I think that everybody should have a view of their own, but don't speak for anybody else, whether you're a woman or not.
But my question is, why are you opposed to the Irish people deciding on this issue again?
Because at this stage, I think the country's in bits and everything else, and I think trying to fast forward for children to be slaughtered and to be aborted to suit other people who don't use contraception should not be at the top of the list at the moment. I think family planning should be. I think at this day and age, everybody's aware of what they should be doing, not to be ending up in abortion clinics. And I think that, you know, I think we've had enough in this country.
Okay, is there anybody else who supports that position? Anybody else who supports that position? Okay, that woman back there.
I don't support the position the lady have, but the position I have, regardless of my pro-life or active life with kids, the issue I'd have is that people are entitled to have their own opinion. I don't see the problem with people, the government bringing in a referendum. Let us as a people, we're mature enough, we're adults, to decide, is abortion allowed in this country or not? It's kind of taken away from us. We're supposed to be a democratic country and all that, and this is not happening. And regardless of my personal views of abortion or not abortion, we as a people need to decide that ourselves as a country. Back in the day, back in 1980, something when it did happen, things have changed, people have moved on. It's about a person having a choice, their choice, not my choice, not the person next to me's choice. Individual, we need to vote on this, my personal view of it. Thank you.
Anybody else want to deal with this issue? It's a very contentious issue elsewhere. Sorry, Richard, yeah.
Yeah, well, Vincent, for us it absolutely is a red line issue that we need, within the first year of any government, there has to be a referendum to repeal the 8th. We cannot have any more X cases. We cannot have any more deaths like the tragic death of Savita Halapanavar. We have to recognise the reality that abortion is an Irish fact. Thousands of Irish women are going every year to have abortions in Britain. You have the absolutely appalling situation of people where pregnancies involving fatal fetal abnormality. And on top of that tragedy, we are imposing incredible cruelty on those families, forcing them to go to Britain rather than providing abortion services and facing up to what is a reality in this country. So this is a matter of urgency to give women bodily autonomy and equality of choice and control over their own lives or health. And if we don't do this, more women's lives will be affected, more women's health will be threatened.
Do you have any sympathy for the point made by that person in the audience who talked about who has a moral revulsion at the idea of abortion, for it involves the dismemberment, for instance, of a child? Do you have any sympathy with somebody who has that perspective?
I think it has to be about choice. I mean, of course, people have different views as individuals.
The baby who is dismembered doesn't have a choice.
Yeah, I personally believe that in what is a very difficult situation for women, the only people who can make that choice are the women themselves. I think the idea that the state or the church or others should dictate to women in a crisis pregnancy situation is unacceptable.
Yeah, but a lot of people feel that the state protects other rights and properly protects other rights, or supposedly protects other rights in our society. Why shouldn't it protect the rights of the most vulnerable, as is often seen, the rights of the unborn?
Well, I just don't think it is possible to equate the fetus with a fully grown and developed woman with life and relationships and so on. And I don't think anybody has the right to take upon themselves to make a decision for women in that situation, church or state, because that is the reality. And of course, it has led to the sort of tragedies that we've talked about. In the X case, the needless deaths of women with cancer and so on because they are denied the right to abortion when their life or their welfare or their health is threatened. That situation cannot persist.
Okay, you mentioned Savita Halapanavar. Well, a number of inquiries into the cause of her death have concluded that it was medical negligence that led to her death, not the absence of abortion. So how is her predicament relevant to this issue?
Well, as I understand the situation, she was screaming, literally screaming for a termination. I mean, I'm not a medical doctor, but I think in a situation like that, where a woman's health is threatened, the decision should be hers. The idea that doctors are having to look over their shoulder at the law or the state, that they might get in trouble for providing the medical attention that a woman needs and demands herself, is absolutely unacceptable.
Okay, Frank.
I think it's totally wrong to discuss, I can't even say her name, sorry.
Savita
Halpanavar. We don't understand her case. It's inappropriate to discuss her case. She's a woman who's suffered a horrific tragedy, and her family have suffered a horrific tragedy, and I think it's too difficult for them, and too difficult for. We don't really understand all of it. This is a complex issue, and I have sympathy for this girl, and I think that personally, I think it's horrific that our country forces people to travel to the UK. That seems like barbaric. If people are travelling to the UK, we should actually deal with this ourselves.
Do you see how people who are pro-life, or people who are anti-abortion, that they view abortion as barbaric?
I do. I think that's very understandable. I think that person's point of view is actually perfectly understandable. I think it's a perfectly valid point of view, and she is entitled to her point of view and entitled to live to that. Absolutely, and I respect that completely. I also actually find it impossible for me as a man to tell a woman what she should do with her body, and that wins over it for me.
The leader of your party left Fine Gael, or was excluded from Fine Gael because she voted against the legislation on abortion, which was necessary because of the Supreme Court judgment in the X case.
And that was her personal opinion, and she's entitled to that.
Yeah, but it would seem to suggest that that's the culture of the Renewal Party.
No, it's not. The culture of the Renewal Party is that everybody is entitled. This is a personal issue, and people are entitled to vote with their own conscience. And I think that's a very important thing. And there are rights on both sides of this.
Okay, Carl, you want?
Can I just say that 1 in 5 pregnancies end in miscarriage anyway during the first 3 months. That's one of the reasons that most women won't tell people they're pregnant until after the 3 months. It's also the time when the vast, vast majority of abortions take place. And in the cases where they don't take place during that time, it's usually because of fatal fetal abnormality or something else, some sort of a health problem, or because the women cannot travel, do not have the money or the time to travel to the UK or other countries. So by actually having the 8th in place, we're actually preventing women from having abortions earlier. Also, I'd just like to say on the pro-life thing, we seem to have a rather hypocritical view. We're very, very caring about the unborn while they're still within the womb, but once they're born, they seem to be left to themselves. I mean, we now have 1 in 6 children who are living in poverty in Ireland. If only we could extend that care to children when they're actually out of the womb, I think we might be a better society for it.
Okay. Go on with the yellow microphone, yeah.
I would like to take the point of view, agree with the point of view, we should be caring for children after they're born, absolutely, but we should also care for them before they're born. There are extreme cases of fatal fetal, whatever it's called, etc. And they are not the same issue, or they're an extreme point of an issue, which is very different depending. Do you agree that a baby of 22, 3 or 4 weeks gestation should be just killed because the mother wants doesn't want to have that child for whatever reason it is? Yesterday, today is Monday, yesterday I went on a walk, a hill walk, with a mother and the child herself, a young man who's Down syndrome child without. And that was a really interesting thing, because she said in Sweden and various other countries she'd visited to do with the Down syndrome association, there aren't any Down syndrome children anymore. They have mostly been aborted in the womb before they're even born. And many other handicapped people apparently have too. Is that what we want in this society? Don't we want children or people to be born? It is not the church or men. I'm all against men in church and other people making decisions for me. Thank you very much. But I'm not against the state, as Vincent mentioned there, protecting the most vulnerable people, in particular people with, for example, a handicap, among other things. That is not to say there couldn't be cases that are not being dealt with now, such as the fatal fetal ones, that are extremely, it's an extreme rendering, so to speak. That could be modified and removed or dealt with without having to have abortion effectively on demand.
Yes, well, can I just put it to you that the issue of abortion in such circumstances is indeed a very serious moral issue. And the question is, who should take the moral decision? Is it the woman, or should it be the state take the moral decision in that instance?
I think that we must see the human person as being very valuable. That's the basis of human rights legislation, and the whole idea of Amnesty and these other associations was the absolute inviolable importance of the individual human person. Whether we like them, whether they smell, whether they're poor, whether they're handicapped, they are all important. And I agree that there may be room for modification of that view in modern circumstances with very early pregnancies who are in a very serious illness of some sort or other.
You seem to be saying that the woman shouldn't have the right to decide on that issue, it should be the state. Is that your position?
I definitely think there should be laws or guidelines, medical and other, and moral guidelines to help her to make a decision. I do not think any human being should have the ultimate right totally over another human, just as over another human life. Neither should she have when the baby is born either. 3 or 4 weeks later, when the baby's a baby, should she decide she just really wanted any more? No. I think that the fact 2 or 3 weeks before it's born or 2 or 3 weeks after it's born, in my view, it's to a certain degree the same human being we're talking about.
Okay, the person with the blue microphone. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Alan Parr, and I just want to say that I am pro-life. I think everybody here today wasn't aborted, and I think it's a very sad thing, and the psychological effects, although recognised or not, they do go on. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to
the candidates' stances on repealing the 8th Amendment.
People Before Profit, everybody from all around the country, that we've already 5 people spoke from People Before Profit, and there are 10 members altogether, isn't there?
Probably, yeah, thereabouts.
Come on, yeah.
Yeah, no, and also if they are for abortion in the cases of rape, incest, or fatal fetal abnormalities. Thank you.
Okay, are you in favour of a repeal of the 8th Amendment, Lucinda?
No, I'm not. I start, I suppose, looking at the issue from the point of view that there are 2 human beings involved, and therefore I think that it is essential that we retain protection in our constitution for both women and the unborn child.
And why are you against allowing the Irish people an opportunity to decide for themselves whether the 8th Amendment should be repealed or not?
Well, I'm not particularly.
So you're in favour of the 8th Amendment referendum?
No, I'm not in favour of the 8th Amendment being repealed.
I don't. Are you in favour of having a referendum on the 8th Amendment?
But yeah, I think that there are many issues that we could have referenda on. I'm not sure that this is the most pressing. We've had several referendums already on the question of abortion. There are issues like the right to housing, which I think we should have a referendum on. There are areas of political reform that I think we should have referenda on. But when it comes to my party, Renew Ireland, we will have a free vote on any such issue, and it'll be up to each individual member to decide.
Why are you against allowing the people to decide on whether the 8th Amendment should be repealed?
I'm not.
So you're in favour of referendum?
No. Can I just answer the question that you've asked? I'm not opposed to holding a referendum on any particular issue.
Okay.
But you can have, a list of 150 questions that you want to have a referendum on. I think it's quite unusual to have a referendum to remove rights from the Constitution. Usually, you have referenda to insert rights in the Constitution, to strengthen rights in the Constitution.
Perspective on the abortion issue, whether it's giving women rights to decide how their own bodies should be used.
Of course, it depends on your perspective. But as I said, my view is that there are 2 human beings involved, and I think that we have to retain that protection.
Okay, this person here. Yeah.
Vincent, the way you framed the question as well was all around the rights of a person to do what they want with their own body, but you're neglecting what Lucinda is saying. There are 2 bodies involved, there are 2 people involved. That's why people are
I'm just
concerned.
saying that the issue of abortion is a very complex issue, and there is the issue of the right of the there's the issue of the unborn and their entitlement to live, and there also is the issue of entitlement of a woman to decide what is done with her own body, for instance, particularly graphically in the case of rape, for instance.
Yes.
Why should she be forced to bring to full termination the child of a rapist, maybe a very cruel and vicious rapist? Yes. And she's horrified at the idea of bringing that child to full termination.
You're talking in that case. You're talking about 2 horrors. the horror of rape and the horror of destroying an innocent child. Why should a child be killed because his father is a rapist? Why should a child in his very slow, initial stages of development be killed all because his father is a rapist?
Okay, the person with the blue microphone here.
Hi there. My name is Rebecca. I'm from the Pro-Life campaign. I was just wondering, with all the radio coverage that the medical profession has gotten over the past couple of weeks, pleading for funding to keep our medical personnel here and to attract new medical personnel to the country. I don't understand why the funding that they're asking for to do research wouldn't be focused more towards doing the likes of in utero operations to help save the unborn, because our policies that are in place at the moment, like the First 1,000 Days campaign, which is all about protecting the mother and the child is recognised as a life in that campaign. If you look at the people who are talking about banning smoking, banning drinking while pregnancy, not saying that I am advocating for that, but it does show that it is a clear recognition that that is a life and not cells. Otherwise, why try to put into those protections in place? And finally, why support abortion when all of the medical evidence that we have to date has shown that it only leads to negative side effects for the woman? No positive side effects have been brought forward by any medical profession.
Okay, the person with the yellow microphone.
Thanks, Vincent. Sam Duffy, Fianna Fáil. I just want to say on you're talking about rape there in the case of abortion in the case of rape, but my own view on it is that I don't think anyone has the right to decide the life of the unborn, even if the woman was raped, because how will abortion heal the pain of the rape of the child? So if by the child being aborted, how will that...
It's a unique idea that the state intervenes to tell a person, in this instance a woman, how her body should be used. It's an absolutely unique issue.
Yeah, but I think, though, that no one has the right to decide the life of the unborn. Why should an unborn suffer because the woman was raped? That wasn't the fault of the child, though.
Okay, Glenna.
Look, in the Social Democrats, we're absolutely in favour of repealing the 8th and urgently. I think, Vincent, just to say, women in Ireland have waited for an extraordinarily long time, and the thing that I'm encountering in the last 2 years, and I think it's so uplifting, women of my age and much older than me, quiet people, are finally saying we've had enough of this extraordinary situation that we've been placed in this country. People are travelling, people are upset, the fatal fetal abnormality women have been treated appallingly, as have women in Ireland over our long history. It has to end now in 2016. It can't be kicked down the road anymore. And this thing of going to the Constitutional Convention, it just seems like another, will we let somebody else decide, will we have a referendum? We deserve a referendum, there's an appetite for a referendum, and we need to have one.
Okay. Eamon, yeah.
There are people in the Green Party with different views on this, but the majority say we should have an amendment, or we should have a referendum on the 8th Amendment, and I agree with that. I think Peter Studden was right back 30 years ago that the fundamental wording was flawed and wrong. I come from a pro-life perspective myself. That's where I come from. I agree with that lady. Yes, it is a life. I don't see, people with different views, but that's my view. But actually, and I don't think to say you're in favour of the referendum and removing it means that you're anti-life as such. But actually, looking at it 30 years on and all the debates we've had, I think actually we need to change our laws and go back to actually leave the responsibility with the woman and the doctor and certain limits in it. And I think, because ultimately, what we want is to reduce the number of abortions. We are not doing, at present, our women are going to England. We are ignoring that reality and seeing that as the solution to our problem. And I don't think that's right or fair the way we manage it at this present time. And I don't think the legislation we have is even right in terms of a woman having a 14-year sentence possibly over her head. Our recent cases where we're performing caesarean sections at 25 weeks. It is a legal quagmire and a mess. And I don't think it's actually doing what I think there is common consensus on, is to reduce the number of abortions we have to treasure all our children if we can. But there are certain instances where a woman decides she now wants the child, and I think we should start recognising that.
The debate continues after this break. Jim.
I just think we have to be careful about jumping into another divisive abortion referendum. Those abortion referendums are dominated by people who have very strong black views or strong white views. It just brings out the extremes. I think what we should do is what was proposed by Billy Kelleher, the Fianna Fáil spokesperson, that we should give consideration to all of these really difficult issues by way of an Oireachtas commission. That is a better way of dealing with it than simply saying, let us now put it forward and have it as an election issue. And if it's considered by the Oireachtas, and in fairness, the Oireachtas Commission and the reports and the inquiries prior to the termination of the pregnancy bill worked quite effectively. But one thing we should also try to do, if we're going to try to discourage abortion, we've got to ensure that young mothers who are found with unwanted pregnancies have the support of the state, and we need to ensure that that is available.
Jim, are you personally in favour of repeal of the 8th Amendment? Yes or no?
I personally think people should be given the option to vote on it.
And what way would you vote?
I wouldn't remove all protection for the unborn child. I think there should be constitutional protection for the unborn, but I think we have an extremely restrictive regime at present. But I don't think anyone, maybe I'm wrong about this, but my assessment of it is that there is not demand amongst the people of Ireland, and people of Ireland are entitled to have a say in this, for there to be abortion available on demand. But the circumstances of people who are victims of rape,
with Billy Kelleher.
So the circumstances of people who are victims of rape and fetal abnormalities, it's very cruel and unfair in those people.
Okay, Chris Andrews.
We support repeal of the 8th. I think the government is kicking the can down the road. I think it needs to act decisively. And like you have said, we have to allow the people to decide.
Okay, the person with the blue microphone.
Sorry, Vincent, I'm Jeffrey Porter. I'm a resident of Blackrock. I've just a couple of points to make. First of all, Vincent and also the gentleman here, Chris, both used a phrase about women deciding what to do with their own bodies. It's a medical fact. The unborn child is not part of a woman's body. It's in a woman's body. The second point I want to make is that thanks to the...
the issue is, should a woman's... and it's unique in moral issues, that a woman is required to, under present law, is required to give her body to a sustenance of another person. And that's unique. There's no such demand made on any man.
Yeah, but the unborn child is not part of the woman's body. It's a separate, unique individual.
Yes,
and the other point is as well is that thanks to the 8th Amendment, there are thousands, tens of thousands of Irish citizens alive today. These are unique people and they're valued people in our society. Why is nobody talking to them?
We're going now to a discussion on the 8th Amendment, which in 1983 inserted into the Constitution a provision which gave the unborn child the equal right to life as the mother. So we go to the person with the red microphone.
Hi, my name is Tomas Sinahan. I'm the editor of University of Limerick's student paper. I'm also a human rights activist in general. Now, my question to all the candidates up there is how many of them support repeal of the 8th Amendment and how many of them will support a referendum? Because looking around this room, the majority of people here have never even had a say on our constitutional provision. The majority of people. Now, Savita has died in Galway. Miss Y was tortured. There was also that horrendous case last December where a brain-dead woman was kept artificially alive, all because of the 8th. I have heard women telling me that they cannot get adequate health care in our hospitals because of the 8th Amendment, that there is always priority given to a fetus over their lives and health and well-being. So I want to know, all these candidates, including Fianna Fáil, who last week in a poll by the Pat Kenny show, none of them said they would support. Now, I speak on behalf of students.
Okay, let's go to the question of each of the candidates. Okay, James, are you in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment?
Well, the Green Party, we're in favour of the referendum, and I myself, personally, I'm in favour of repealing the amendment. I think having the criminal justice system to deal with what is essentially a health issue is a totally inappropriate way to deal with at this moment.
Well, it's not an issue at the moment yet, the repeal of the 8th Amendment, and Renew, each member in Renew, it'll be down to a conscious decision with regard to that. So I don't think it's an issue for me at the moment.
Well, you could tell us what your conscientious view is on that. Well, what's your conscientious view on that?
Well, being a father of 3 children, I think there's 2 people involved.
Yes. Okay, go on, yeah.
That's it.
And are you in favour of repeal of the 8th Amendment?
If people want to have a referendum,
Are you in favour of allowing them a choice?
If people want to have a referendum, I think we should have a referendum.
But no, people won't have a referendum on whether to have a referendum. The question is, are you in favour of a referendum to proposing the repeal of the 8th Amendment?
Again, there's 2 people involved, and if there's a referendum, I think we should.
Well, tell us what your view is. Are you in favour of the people having a choice by having a referendum on the repeal of the 8th Amendment?
Every citizen of Ireland is entitled to have a choice. On every citizen of Ireland is entitled to have a choice, and if a referendum is proposed, they're entitled to vote in the referendum.
But I'm asking you yet again, are you in favour of having a referendum on that issue?
I suppose I am, if it's proposed.
You suppose you are?
Well, it's not an issue at the moment, Jane.
Yes, it is. I'm asking you the question.
Okay. If there's a referendum on the 8th Amendment...
No. Are you in favour of, if you're by chance elected to the Dáil, will you vote for a referendum to repeal the 8th Amendment?
No.
Oh, thank you. Why didn't you say that at the outset?
I just thought...
Sarah Jane, yeah.
Yeah. Completely in favour of people's right to have a vote on the 8th Amendment. It's a woman's right to choose. But I do think that some of the extreme arguments around abortion in this country are actually damaging the campaign around it, around dealing with women who have been in cases like Savita Halep-Papaner and other women like that. We need to talk about actually getting to that point first before we can talk about abortion on demand, as some people like to call it. So I think, yes, we're completely in favour of repeal of the amendment.
I'm in favour of a referendum to repeal the 8th Amendment. I brought that proposal to the Limerick Council. If we're waiting for it to be an issue for days, we're going to be waiting a long, long time. But it is an issue. It's a concrete issue for thousands of women in this state right now. Not just the extreme cases, the people whose lives have been put at risk, or in Savita's case, who have actually tragically died because of this blanket ban on abortion. But it's an issue for thousands of other women who face a 14-year prison sentence. 2 seconds. 14-year prison sentence for having an abortion in this state. That's a position that only 7% of the Irish population agree with. Only 7%, but yet the majority in the Dáil, Labour in particular, voted for that as well.
I support the call for a referendum. I support the call for a referendum, and I'll be voting yes in that referendum. I think it's beyond time that we have that referendum. Let the people decide. The people are very mature in this country. We had a fantastic referendum this year on equality of marriage, and it showed that people have matured in this country.
Willie, when I asked you about taxation issues earlier on, you said you were giving your personal opinion. What's your personal opinion? Are you in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment, or are you in favour of having a referendum to repeal the 8th Amendment?
Well, I'll answer both questions here, Vincent. I'm not in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment, and I wouldn't support a referendum to do it at the moment until I see what was going to be put in its place.
Well, the repeal of the 8th Amendment would simply leave it open to the Oireachtas to legislate on the issue of abortion. It would simply leave it open to the Oireachtas. That would be the legal effect, as you know, of repealing the 8th Amendment.
Yeah.
So you know. So you don't have to hide behind that cover.
I'm not hiding behind anything. I told you I'm a supporter of the 8th Amendment, and I'm not. The Taoiseach has promised that if he's returned, and I'm sure, he's confident he will be. I don't know. I wouldn't be as confident, but
you almost said, Willie, I'm sure he will be returned. But let's go on.
No.
You almost said. You almost slipped into that. Go on.
No, but look. There will obviously, if there is pressure after the election for a referendum, if there is a move for a referendum, there obviously will have to be some discussion on that. And the discussion, of course, will include what is going to be put in its place. And I would have to see that discussion before I'd rush headlong into another referendum.
OK, I want to go to people who haven't spoken in the debate before. Go to the person with the yellow microphone,
John O'Gorman, I have no affiliation. People that's pro-life don't need a referendum because they don't want abortion. It's a few hundred abortionists and some of the political parties and the Amnesty International.
Who are abortionists, do you know? Who are the abortionists?
Who are the pro-abortionists?
No, you said abortionists. Who are the abortionists?
I don't understand who...
You said that you refer to abortionists. Who are the abortionists?
I said pro-abortions. Pro-abortion.
You didn't actually, but go on.
But the people are pro-abortion.
All right, yeah. Pro-choice.
Pro-choice, pro-abortion. they've got this appetite for this Luciferian ideology. And that was indicated by the 30,000 people that turned out above in Dublin last July, when there was only a couple of hundred pro-choice there. And I mean, the word pro-choice, well, if a woman enters into a sexual relationship with a man and she chooses that, and she's fully aware that she can...
What if she's raped?
What if she's what?
What if she's raped?
First of all, if she's raped, the father of the baby is subject to prosecution by a court of law, and he's in the control of the judiciary.
But should the woman be criminalised if she doesn't want to bring the child to full term?
The baby didn't rape anybody, Vincent.
I know.
And a baby is a baby. That's why he didn't rape anybody. But the baby is still her flesh and blood. And it's misfortune that she's been raped, but that can't be reversed. And it's a known fact that she continued through her pregnancy up to giving birth, that the giving birth reduces the trauma of the birth, of the rape. Yeah, because her maternity instincts have kicked in. She has a baby to look after.
Okay, thank you. Person over here, the black microphone. We'll go to people who haven't spoken before. You have preference to people who haven't spoken before. Go ahead,
Vincent, Seamus Ryan, non-affiliated. I just like to highlight that we just heard a guy saying that giving birth reduces the trauma of rape. Now, I'm not saying that everybody who's pro-life or who's anti-abortion availability is as interesting as that. But the fact of the matter is, Willie O'D wants a good discussion after we propose that maybe repeal the 8th Amendment. We've been having a discussion since 1983. We had a discussion before 1983, and the only reason we had an amendment in 1983 was because of paranoid people who thought that the McGee case, the condom case, following the Griswold case in the US, was going to follow Roe versus Wade, and we're going to have available abortion within a few years. The 8th Amendment, regardless of what side you're on, whether you're anti-abortion or pro-choice, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, pick any label you want, it's not even fit for purpose. That's why Savita Halappanavar died in Galway.
That's not clear that that's what happened, but go on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in any case, we've got 50 or 60,000 people travelling to the UK for abortions. It's an Irish solution to an Irish problem. If the UK wasn't there, our people wouldn't have to stump up the price of a Ryanair flight. And the fact of the matter is that some people, and some of them are raped, and some of them have fetuses that have fetal abnormalities, can't afford the flight to the UK. So it's time we took a decision as a people, and in my case, I'm in favour of a referendum, and I'm in favour of abolishing the 8th. But we need to take a definitive choice as a people. That's all. Thanks.
I would just like to point out that no woman of childbearing age had a vote in that referendum. I think it's high time that our so-called public representatives gave people who can have a baby, who can become pregnant, a decision in this matter. And for that matter, it should be the woman's right to choose. But I would just point out, no woman of childbearing age has had a say in the referendum.
The person here with a blue microphone, is it, or black microphone? I can't see from here.
Hi, my name is Michelle Kennedy. I'm not affiliated to any party. I'm pro-choice, and Willie and everyone here, the fact of the matter is that if the male sex had the ability to reproduce, we would not even be having this discussion.
Okay, we've got to take another break, and we'll get
as well.
What do you make of the judgment in the Northern Court on the abortion issue?
Well, this story is in relation to Mr Justice Mark Horner, who has upheld a case which was put by the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, basically to allow for abortion in cases where a baby has a life-limiting condition. Interestingly, the Attorney-General is going to challenge this case, unsurprisingly, because in case law in the UN Court of Human Rights there is no internationally recognised right to abortion. I think probably the troubling thing for me here is what the judge said. He said that there is no life here to protect, and I would imagine families who've had children with such life-limiting conditions would be deeply distressed and upset by that particular language. But it'll be interesting to see what will happen with the Attorney-General challenging the case.
Okay, Sinead, do you want to get in?
Just on that, I know that there was a couple of statements from groups today who have been in the position travelling from Ireland to the UK with fatal fetal abnormality fatal fetal abnormalities, and they have welcomed the decision in the North to say that Ireland are kind of on notice now as well to look at this, and because we have the same situation here where when people get these diagnoses that they are being made to travel to England if they wish to terminate the pregnancy. So it is something that has been welcomed by some of those families.
There was a distinction drawn as well in the court, in the court by the judge, saying that the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission had looked for, in 2 cases, fatal fetal abnormalities, but also in serious malformation of the fetus, and the judge rejected an abortion in the situation of the serious malformation of the fetus. So there was a distinction drawn between the two. Whether how you can legislate for that is going to be a challenge.
Okay. Any other stories? I remember, incidentally, Regina, Enda Kenny saying in an interview with me in a car being driven from New Ross to Kilkenny during the 2007 election that under no circumstances ever would Fine Gael under him legislate for abortion, ever. Can you believe anything he says?
I believe everything practically that my leader says.
Practically. Let's pause on the word practically.
Let's pause.
No. Tell us what you don't believe.
No, okay, put me in an awkward spot. The world has changed an awful lot since 2007.
The practically bit.
The world has changed.
Why that qualification? Why that qualification? Tell us.
Because I don't believe everything that everybody says, for God's sake.
So what about what Enda says don't you believe?
The world has changed a lot since 2007, and I think people's views, particularly with regard to the stories that we've heard of parents of children who have been diagnosed with fatal fetal abnormalities, and not just the ones that have travelled, but the ones that have stayed, because they're both deserving of having the issue being addressed, whether it's by providing perinatal hospice care for the families who choose to
the world didn't change that much in the last week, as far as I noticed.
I think it's good, isn't it?
And Enda Kenny started last week by saying that, no question, Fine Gael wouldn't seek to repeal the 8th Amendment. And then he defied a few times by James Riley, and he backed off all that, saying, we'll think about repealing the 8th Amendment.
No, he certainly hasn't said he'd think about it. I think he was very clear and adamant to us at the Parliamentary Party on Wednesday night was that he would not be advocating a referendum. What he would advocate was to establish within 6 months of the formation of the next government, if obviously Fine Gael form part of that next government, a citizens' forum where the people will decide.
Well, that is
it's not up to us to lead
step to a referendum. I think if you see the polls, that is a first step to the referendum, because there is an appetite for not across-the-board referendum on abortion, but as Labour, women have put forward a referendum so that it allows for cases of rape, incest, fatal fetal abnormalities. There is an absolute appetite for that. So having a civic convention is the first step to a referendum. I think a politician changing their mind on a social issue. We saw the same-sex marriage. We saw Enda Kenny changing his mind on that.
Okay.
I don't think it's a negative thing. I think
in a week, though, is a bit
changing
much,
in a week is political savvy. It's definitely him looking at an issue and looking at it from a politician heading into and a Taoiseach heading into an election. But I think it will be looked on favourably by a lot of people that it is actually going to be a conversation rather than Fianna Fáil saying absolutely not, we're not going to have a referendum on this.
Again, I'm not sure he has changed his mind, to be very honest with you, and I was there in the room. Like what he said very clearly was...
To be very honest.
He knows the tide is turning on this issue. I think he knows that a conversation has to be had rather than a blanket yes or no from a party.
And that's absolutely true. The conversation does have to be had.
But that's the point of a referendum, is to give people the choice.
Well, the choice of what?
The choice of whether to repeal the 8th Amendment or not.
And if you decide to repeal the 8th, what choice are you going to offer people after you ask them to repeal the 8th? You then are in the same legal situation as you are now. For that would be it. It would require the Oireachtas then to change the law. So, but then, for what are you offering people in exchange of the 8th if they decide to take it out? No, we haven't had that conversation.
What you're saying is that you're then giving the Oireachtas freedom to make what the Oireachtas thinks is the best decision on these issues, given evolving circumstances which you seem to be keen on.
OK, well, I would be much rather listen to what the Irish people would like to see if the repeal of the 8th was to happen, as opposed to 166 politicians deciding. Because every single time we've had this debate in Leinster House, and there's been various opposition motions have been put down over the past couple of years, it's the most contentious, divisive debate or discussion that I've ever encountered. So what I'd like to hear is, in a reasonable setting like we had with the Constitutional Convention, with Irish people, normal Irish people who have views that don't live in a black world or a white world, but live in the grey world, to hear what their views are, and to hear that if they were to decide that, in, for argument's sake, the case of fatal fetal abnormalities, what they would insert into the Constitution to replace the 8th Amendment if they were to take it out, or if they decided that they wanted, in cases of maybe incest or rape, what they would insert into the Constitution, because right now I've no idea what that looks like.
But Regina, is there not an acceptance that the 8th Amendment was mistaken? It was the wrong approach, and that has to go.
By a number of people, Eamon, yes, but by the vast majority of people in Ireland,
at the time it was put in, he called it uncertain, ambiguous. It was a terrible piece of legislation. We knew that in 1983 when it was actually put in.
Make that claim that the majority of people want to hold it, because recent polls would indicate that there's been a huge shifting of ground on that, and at a minimum, I think, in the case of fatal fetal abnormality, people feel that, you know, people who find themselves in those circumstances shouldn't have to travel to the UK.
And I agree on that particular issue, but I'm going to tell you, I canvass every single weekend, not just for elections, and nobody ever knocks, when I knock on a door, tells me, come here and I tell you I want you to repeal the 8th Amendment. Nobody does. And I don't live in conservative Ireland. I live in an urban area.
Do they just tell you how great Andy Kenny is? Is that what they do?
They tell me frequently how great Andy Kenny is and what a great job he's doing, and hopefully they'll be able to get a vote for him in the next one.
OK, we're going to go to another break, and after the break... OK, we're going to talk now about the 8th Amendment, and there are a number of people in the audience who want to talk on this issue, and we go to somebody with the person with the yellow microphone.
My name is Mal O'Neill. I'm a Kildare Town resident, and I'd like to discuss the elephant in the room that is abortion. There is abortion in Ireland. It's not talked about, but it's hidden under the bed. Basically, the current situation is that it's such a grey area. You can go for an abortion if you see 4 counsellors and that you can claim that you're suicidal, or the fact that it might harm the mother. This does not consider or take into account those people that face every single day the fact that they've been raped or that the fetus isn't viable. This happens every day, and where would we be if we didn't have the crutch that is the UK to basically taking our most vulnerable women over there and helping them when our own country is turning their back on them? We need to repeal the 8th Amendment. It's too vague. There's too much. There's too little basically put out there for even a doctor would be afraid to carry out an abortion because there's so little. Because it's such a grey area regards the whole suicide and the danger to the mother. We have to repeal the 8th. There has to be something put in place for the safety of the women of this country. They've been let down in the history of Ireland. Women have been let down in many occasions regards symphysiotomy and child and baby centres and all these things. And in my opinion, the women of Ireland are continued to be let down by having the 8th Amendment still in place.
OK. Can I just get an indication from the floor? How many people would... how many people are in favour of the 8th Amendment being put to the people? And how many people against? OK, so of the people who put up their hands, there's a very clear majority in favour. Can I just ask the candidates, are you in favour of the 8th Amendment, yes or no? Are you in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment?
I'd rather wait and see what the convention throws up, but I would be against the full abortion rights. I would be against that.
But would you be in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment and leaving it up to the Oireachtas to decide what should replace it?
Yes, then, OK, yeah.
OK, what about you?
I think on such on a moral issue like this, you cannot say yes or no on something like that. I would be in favour of repealing it because what's there isn't working, because people can travel every day. But it is a moral dilemma, and you will find no woman more stronger than I about women's rights. But it is an entirely unique situation where you have a life growing inside you at whatever point.
Okay, but you're in favour of repealing.
I am in favour of repealing the 8th, but I am not in favour of abortion at any stage of a pregnancy.
Of any, irrespective of the circumstances.
You know, past a
fatal fetal
abnormalities, rape and incest at early stages.
But I think you'd be in favour of abortions in those circumstances. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay.
Favour is a word that I even find difficult talking about, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, I think it must be very difficult for any woman and her family and any mother who finds themselves in that situation. And I think that it is time that in Ireland that we faced up to having the debate. And I think that we are mature enough now to have that and to look at all the issues.
The question is, I'm in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment.
I'm in favour of having the debate about it. I think where we are is
Are you
wrong.
in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Patricia, are you in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment? Martin, are you in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment?
Vincent, myself and my wife are expecting our second child in the coming days, and every time I go to the Coombe, I see it firsthand, just exactly how dangerous a process it is to have a baby, and it's not a straightforward situation. And while I am opposed to abortion on demand, I would accept that there's no situation when it comes to this that is black and white. In relation to your question, if there was to be a vote on repealing the 8th Amendment, I would want to know what's going to replace that.
What would replace it presumably would be, it would be up to the Oireachtas to decide what would replace it.
If there was to be a referendum, we have no idea what the wording of it would be. So it's too simplistic to say yes or no.
Well, assume that the referendum was, are you in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment or are you not? Which way would you vote?
I would want to know what's going to replace it. I don't think the situation...
It would be up to the Oireachtas.
Well, like, I would agree with the situation that the Taoiseach has proposed, which is a citizens' assembly.
Kick the touch, yeah. Kick the touch. So avoid taking a decision on it and avoid losing votes.
Absolutely not.
That's what that means,
I've been very clear about this.
Okay, Sean.
Well, I will be very clear. In 1983, I canvassed in support of the amendment. I would oppose repealing the amendment, and I say so as the father of 3 teenage daughters. I have 2 sisters. I care as much about women's welfare as anybody else in this particular room. And in addition to that, I have, over the last year or so, met 3 children whose mothers had been told that those children would have fatal fetal abnormalities. And they may not be fully healthy, but they're running around playing today. And that is something that is very important to me.
Okay, why are you in favour, why are you opposed to allowing the Irish people decide on whether to repeal the 8th Amendment or not?
No, I'm not. I would never oppose a referendum.
So you're in favour of the referendum?
If there's to be a referendum, let it happen.
Are you in favour of there being a referendum?
I won't be proposing a referendum. I won't oppose a referendum, and if the referendum happens, I will vote against repealing it, and I will campaign against it. I don't quite
understand your point. Are you in favour of the Irish people having the choice on whether to repeal the 8th Amendment or not?
If we are shown what the clear alternative
would be that the Oireachtas
you don't know what the clear alternative would be.
As of
you can
now,
only speculate.
The repeal of the 8th Amendment, it would be up to the Oireachtas then to decide, unless the Supreme Court decided that in spite of the repeal of the 8th Amendment, abortion continued to be unconstitutional. But we assume that it should be open to the Oireachtas to decide. You wouldn't be in favour of that?
No, I wouldn't.
You're in favour of the Oireachtas deciding?
I wouldn't be in favour of the Oireachtas. Look, I'm in favour of there being a referendum if that's what's going to happen, because the people must be allowed their opportunity. But I am saying that I will oppose the appeal, and I will canvass against it.
Okay. Welcome back. We're going to talk now briefly about the repeal of the 8th Amendment. We'll go to the person with the red microphone. Go ahead, yeah.
Hello, my name is Eleni and I'm from the Anti-Austerity Alliance. I want to talk about the 8th Amendment and the urgent need for it to be repealed, because I think it's a very well-known fact that Ireland's geographical proximity to Britain is the only reason why the political establishment in this country has been given the luxury to push this very important issue under the rug, pretend it doesn't exist, and let another country and another health system solve it. I think the 8th Amendment should not be replaced. It should not be rewarded by some panel of judges. It should not be altered. It needs to be repealed and then not replaced by some other restrictive legislation. Campaigning on the issue with the AAA, We meet a lot of women who had to deal with this very, very difficult decision on their own, because they had to go to England to do this without the support or the help or the presence of their friends and family. So I think it's important that this issue is addressed. I think one woman dying because of the constitutional ban on abortion is one woman too many. One woman being denied the right to choose for herself is one woman too many. And I'd like to know whether candidates here will campaign or promote the repeal of the 8th, and what will they propose to do if a referendum passes?
Okay. Person with the blue microphone, yeah.
My name's Cara, and I'm with the Anti-Austerity Alliance. I'm also asking candidates whether they're going to support a repeal of the 8th Amendment, or they're going to replace it with another way of making it more complicated for women to get abortions. I think it's a really big issue for all women, but particularly young women like me. I'm 16 and I wasn't even born when the 8th Amendment came into the Constitution, but it affects me and it affects my life and my choices. So I hope that candidates will support a repeal of the 8th Amendment, because it's long overdue that we have a referendum on it.
Okay, does anybody want to oppose the repeal of the 8th Amendment? Okay.
I just feel that what is often missing from this debate is the fact that it's a child, it's an unborn child. And if we're going to be talking about legal protection of lots of things, why can't we talk about the legal protection of the unborn child? We're talking about vulnerable people all the time. Surely a child who's unborn is very vulnerable and needs some kind of protection. A lot of people wouldn't be here, maybe in this room, if there was no protection for the unborn child. That's just, you know, I think we need balance in the debate as well. And I understand people's difficult circumstances, I really do. But anyway,
okay, thank you. The person with the red microphone, yeah. Can you stand up, yeah?
My name is Noel Sweeney. I have no political affiliations, whatever. But I will say one thing, that every child has a right to be born. And doctors make mistakes. And even one child dying or being sent or being aborted, I think is appalling. And while the lady there was talking about it, I do agree that there is certain circumstances, but those circumstances would have to be very, very well thought out before anything like that can happen. Now, I see local politicians, I see it seems to be a nice thing to do, but the fact is that every child has the right to be born. And I see no circumstances under which any child should be desiccated with the vacuum cleaners that they use in Britain. Thank you.
Okay, Tony, what's your position on this?
Okay, well...
briefly.
Speaking on this as a man...
No speeches, just tell us straight away. Yeah.
I'm not going to have to make that decision, and that's the first point.
But you'd have to make the decision if you're a member of Dáil Éireann whether to vote for a referendum to repeal the 8th Amendment.
I think we do have to go to the people. I think that the medical profession has moved in a direction where, in the case of fatal fetal abnormality, there is a case to argue. But I think that, and it's my opinion, that the people of Ireland do not want abortion on demand. And that's my opinion.
Okay, Dara, are you in favour of voting in the Dáil, if you get elected to the Dáil, to allow the people to choose on the issue of the repeal of the 8th Amendment?
No, I don't support repealing the 8th without knowing what would replace it. And I don't agree that you can just repeal the 8th and not have other provisions put in place. I've made my stance very clear over the years. Everyone knows my own position on that. I would say that we have asked the government to convene a commission on this with regard to what would replace it. You cannot just... In my view...
So just repeal it. If you repeal it, it would simply leave it up to the Oireachtas to decide how the abortion...
You're asking my opinion, and just with respect, I'm telling you. And I respect everyone's views on it, because this is a very divisive issue. My view is you can't repeal the 8th without knowing what would replace it.
Are you against allowing the people to decide on this issue?
I'm not against referenda, no.
So
I
you're in favour of referenda?
No. Of course I'm in favour of referenda, but it's up to the government that's in place.
No. It's up to the Dáil that decides on this.
No,
I'm asking you, are you in favour of allowing the people to decide on whether to repeal the 8th Amendment or not?
You're being a small bit simplistic on this. You cannot... Well, if you don't mind me saying so, I think you are, right? What I'm saying to you is... Well, that's okay. We won't fall out over it. But what I'm saying is, I would not be in favour of having a referendum and simply repealing the 8th. No, I would not. I think you would have to see...
You wouldn't allow the people the choice on this issue.
On this instance, my belief is that you would have to see what replaces.
We know what would replace it.
We don't.
We do.
We don't.
If you repeal it, if you repeal the 8th Amendment, then it's up to the Dáil to decide.
Well, sorry, but Vincent, you don't know what would replace it. I'm telling you now, I've been strongly, my position in a very difficult debate in relation to the issue of abortion.
Okay.
I've been strongly pro-life, and I remain that way.
Okay,
and
Joe.
I make no apologies for that either.
Okay, Joe, yeah.
We're for a referendum to repeal the 8th Amendment. That would be my personal position as well.
Jerry.
Personally, I'm in favour of a repeal because I think it's not fit for purpose. I think that it creates difficulties, particularly for the medical profession dealing with expectant mothers. I think that it doesn't answer the needs of those, the pro-life group. I like Dara, I would like to see it repealed, but I would want to know what would we be replacing it. In terms of the renewal policy, we are for freedom of conscience.
You can't make up your mind.
We're for freedom of conscience, and we think that that's moral leadership. People make up their own mind. It's an emotive issue. We can't tell people what to behave. I told you what I personally believe.
Okay, Lorraine, yeah.
Yeah, Vincent, I think it's about time we had an open, calm, respectful debate about this. The fact of the matter is that anybody...
We're not talking about whether we should have a debate on the repeal of the 8th Amendment.
Well, we should.
Are you in favour of having a referendum to allow the people to decide whether to repeal the 8th Amendment?
I am in favour of a referendum if there's draft legislation there ready and available for us to see what would be put in place should the 8th Amendment be repealed. I don't think this should be in the Constitution, but we should have robust legislation there in place. I've been speaking to people on the doors about this, and people do want very difficult situations regarding rape, incest and fatal fetal abnormalities dealt with. For too long we've been shipping our problem overseas. It's 100 years since the Rising. We should deal with people within our own country. This is a real situation. It's happening to people. We need to deal with it and speak about it and respect everybody. And it's not a black and white issue. People need to talk about it, and let's come up with a solution for this problem that's presenting. But we need to have the legislation there ready to go if it is repealed.
We already have the legislation in place. If the 8th Amendment were repealed, abortion would still be illegal here. All abortion would still be illegal. That's the legal situation.
But the people I've been speaking to want certainty around the issues in relation to fatal fetal abnormalities, rape and incest. That's not
the present legislation wouldn't permit that. But anyway, go ahead, Terry.
I think it is black and white. I'm in favour of repealing. The Anti-Austerity Alliance will campaign for its repeal and replaced with nothing. It is our position that it's the woman's right to choose with no interference from the state or the church.
Okay, Barry.
Yeah, I'm 100% in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment. I think a lot of our parties are experts in ignoring the reality of the situation, and the reality of the situation is people are going from Ireland to England to get abortions. It happens every day. So why are we making it so much more traumatic for them? We should support our women. We should trust our women. I find it ironic that Lucinda Creighton and Renewal want a conscience clause for TDs, but they won't let individual women on the ground have a conscience clause for themselves. They should have completely the right to choose.
Louise?
Well, Vincent, I'm the mother of a 20-year-old young woman. For her friends, and for the generations to come, because it's too late for people my age, I would support the repeal of the 8th Amendment. I think, you know, for every time this issue is mentioned, people are wheeled out to say, well, it's time we had a calm and rational debate. We've debated this issue up and down. I think repeal
we've had
the
a
8th
calm and
Amendment,
rational debate for 23 years.
Yes. And I think it's time now to repeal the 8th.
Yeah. I'm sorry, it's 33 years.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the point, isn't it, that nobody of present reproductive age had actually got a say in that constitutional decision. Meanwhile, Irish abortion is continuing every day, just not in Ireland, which is hypocritical. It's going back to the days of the Magdalen laundries, the denials and so on. And there's no other health or medical procedure that's actually outlawed or prohibited in our constitution. Now, I think it's very important to say I respect anybody who has a viewpoint, who believes that they personally, are anti-abortion or whatever, but nobody is forcing people of that view to have an abortion. What this is necessary for is to get rid of the 8th Amendment. It can be either legislation or regulation to provide for free, safe, legal abortion for all of the circumstances that women choose, because the women who have abortions are the women who have babies. They're your mothers, your sisters, your daughters, and they do so for very good reasons known only to themselves, and we should respect that and support those decisions, and I think that is what Irish people want.
The abortion issue is a complex one because there's a clash between what we would regard as the rights of the unborn child and the rights of the mother to have a body used in the way that she thinks fit. But there is that clash, and should our laws in any way protect the entitlements of the child involved?
No, look, I think and human rights legislation does not recognise human rights being invoked until the point of birth. I think the majority of people... Is that good enough? I think it is, because, you see, the majority of people would view that, and I suppose we call it, it's been referred to as the unborn child. It's a fetus. It's a small group of cells. It is part of the woman's life and body, which has no...
When does the unborn child become a human being entitled?
Well, we can debate these things. When it's capable of independently living.
Oh, really? So you then think there should be protection up to the...
I believe...
Beyond the point of whatever, 6 months or whatever, when the child is capable of independent living. No, I think you have to look at the facts, right, which is no woman goes through 6, 7, 8 months of pregnancy and then turns around and says, I couldn't be bothered, I think I'll have an abortion. If there's a case for a late abortion, which are rare, and to be honest, countries like Ireland force people to have later abortions by not providing access to the treatment here in Ireland. That's a fact. But late abortions generally come in tragic circumstances where the woman's life or the life of the fetus is at risk. Otherwise, people would have made the decision earlier. And it's only our lack of legislation that denies. Could I just one thing? Obviously, Irish people agree with this, Vincent, because people voted by about 90% to allow women to travel for an abortion. If they thought they were travelling for murder, they wouldn't have voted like that. People understand it's a complex issue. A woman knows her own body. A lot of people on what's called the pro-life side regard abortion as murder. So,
if that's their view, I respect that, and I will fight to defend their right not to have an abortion if that is what they choose, and respect that.
Okay. OK, we'll take another break, and after the break we're going to talk about the 8th Amendment, and we go to the person with the yellow microphone. Go ahead, yeah.
Yes, Concreman non-party. I'm for the retention of the 8th Amendment because the groundswell of opinion in rural Ireland is the pro-life, and I think this is a media-driven kind of the 8th Amendment to have a referendum on repealing it, and I'm very pro-life, and I think you can see in Europe there now in Germany, the birth rate has gone down in Germany. So they're a kind of a dying race because of abortion and contraception. Also in Italy as well.
Are you against contraception as well?
Well, no. Well, I'm against abortion anyway. And
but are you, again, you said the death rate, the birth rate in Germany went down because of abortion and contraception, and the implication of what you said was that you disagreed with both those measures.
Well, I disagree definitely with abortion, and I think...
but you're not sure about contraception?
Well, it's up... Look, we have to have a certain amount of freedoms, but look, the Fifth Commandment... The Fifth Commandment, I believe, anyway, thou shalt not kill. You know, I mean, you were taught the 10 Commandments in school in Bradford and West Limerick, and a lot of the children today haven't been taught the 10 Commandments, and that's another issue that's been brought up here tonight about education. And I think, I think some of the bishops in Ireland should resign because they're not standing up for the faith. That Archbishop in Dublin, Dr. Dermot Martin, he should step down to be an ordinary priest and let some other priests up to be a bishop to do his job, to stand up for the 10 Commandments. And there's terrible bashing of the Catholic Church among the media over the top. And as you know, and you were actually good in your programme, Vincent, you said there's only 3.5, well, there's too many, 3.5, too many of the paedophile cases in Ireland. But by our national broadcaster, the way they were going on top of the thing, you think it was 20%, you know?
Okay, okay. Anybody else want to talk on the issue of the 8th Amendment? Person with the red microphone. Okay.
Hello, Vincent. My name is Don Hennessy. I'm non-party affiliated. I'm pro the 8th Amendment in the 1936 Constitution. And I'd just like to ask the audience who's in favour and who's against
wait,
it.
wait a minute. I asked the questions here. You're against the repeal of the 8th Amendment, is that it? You're against the repeal of
Correct.
the 8th Amendment. All right. Anybody in favour of the repeal of the 8th Amendment?
Hi. I support, my name's Colin McCarthy, Anti-Austerity Alliance. I support the repeal of the 8th Amendment because, and as you can see from the speakers that have already passed, the entire pressure behind it is a means to, and I'm conscious of this being a male, are kind of an older male, church-driven, dominated.
Well, maybe why do you say church-driven? A person of genuine convictions. Why do you call it church-driven?
Well, it's entirely pushed forward by that.
But it's unfair. Just be respectful of the other person. His genuine conviction, and that's it. But go on, yeah.
And on top of that, it's forcing and is putting control of a woman's right to choose.
Okay. Is there any women would like to talk on this issue? Because it doesn't directly affect men much, as far as I'm aware. Any women want to talk on this issue? Okay, go ahead, yeah.
My name is Joan McDermott from the Sinn Féin. I'm a community activist. I have to speak on this issue for the simple reason is it's not about what this gentleman behind us said about the bishops and the priests and making the rules and regulations. It's about women's choice. I worked for many years on the peripheral of Heathrow Airport in a very large hospital where women daily got off the plane at Heathrow, came to the hospital I was working in for terminations. That was their choice. My role as a nurse was to respect that woman's choice. And this is where in 2016 we need the government to change the 8th Amendment in order that women have the right to choose for themselves and not be dominated by the church.
Okay, person with the blue microphone, yeah.
Yeah, Eric Nolan, a member of the Labour Party. I think there's a narrative being driven now that if you speak in favour of the repeal of 8th Amendment, you're somehow against the church and you're attacking the church or along those lines. The fact of the matter is that it's possible to have respect for people's views and people are entitled to think whatever they want about themselves. But when it comes to a person's body, they're entitled to make that decision. And the best person to make that decision is the person who owns the body, and it's the woman in question.
Okay, can I just go to the candidates here? Are you in favour of a repeal of allowing the people to decide whether via a referendum to repeal the 8th Amendment if they so wish?
It's a very strange question to ask if you're in favour of a referendum without knowing what the referendum would exactly say. I think we need to have
repeal the 8th Amendment
without replacing it with anything.
Yes, allowing the Iraq to stand to decide.
So it would be the case of
what the regime should apply to abortion. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't be in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment.
Okay. Paul?
I'm not in favour of the repeal.
Okay.
I am in favour of the repeal. I'm strongly in favour of repealing the 8th Amendment.
Okay, yeah.
I'm strongly
in favour of it, yeah, okay.
Strongly in favour of repealing it.
I'm strongly in favour, but I'd also call myself pro-life. Because what those people are suggesting is that you're somehow against life. In the particular case that we're talking about, in cases where people have...
Okay, yeah.
I'm not going for the Archbishop's job, but I am in favour of keeping the 8th Amendment.
Why are you against allowing the people have a decision to make a decision on whether to repeal the 8th Amendment or not?
Our party leader, from what I gather, has asked that a commission be set up, a retired judge, and if that's of the judiciary, and if wording comes out of a suitable nature, but at the moment I am happy to maintain the 8th Amendment.
But why not allow? What is the argument? Okay,
Yeah, it's easy for a man to say he's in favour of keeping it. You know, I mean,
I don't mean to sound, it's not sexist, but I think every woman should have a right to choose what happens to their body. I mean, I get a feeling that there's a lot of male...
human right.
It is a human right, and it is, and no matter what, it comes down to choice. It comes down to choice whether I want to have an abortion, whether the woman sitting down there wants to have an abortion. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. It's a matter of choice, and I think every single human being has a right to choose for themselves.
Human right.
Okay, can I just ask you, put this to you, do you consider that for a lot of people there is that in the case of an abortion there is another person there, namely the unborn child, and that the Constitution should allow some protection to the unborn child? Do you go along with that?
Well, I would agree that I wouldn't agree that you should be allowed to have an abortion up to 40 weeks. Most countries who have legal abortion, it's a period of 12 weeks. And whereas sometimes it doesn't even have a heartbeat. It's just a case of the woman really isn't ready for it and she can't do it, and this is her choice. But I think I really do feel, for me anyway, it's just choice is the bottom line. And I see where people are saying that it's about the unborn life, but what about the woman who's making this choice? She is alive. So it's a funny situation, but I agree that the choice needs to be there for people, just like it is for everything else.
Okay, Sean.
Well, first of all, to say that we are committed to the referendum, and yes, I am in favour of the repeal. I think you do need to have a legislative base to allow, for instance, and I find it difficult to talk about this as a male, to be quite frank about it, because but I will say that I think in the case of, for instance, fatal fetal abnormalities, that I think you need some, absolute clarity in relation to legislation. And I think we need to start trusting ourselves as well, that if we elect a Dáil, it is a legislature, and that legislature is a tribune of the people, and that we should have faith in the ability of that institution to legislate. Can I make one very brief point in relation to the gentleman who made the point about the commandments? And I just want to also acknowledge the fact that people have their own principles, and what I will say though in relation to Dermot Martin is, to be fair to Dermot Martin, I think what he is trying to do is to steer a course at the moment where the Church in Ireland is going through a difficult period, and where you have increasing secularisation, and particularly in relation to education, where you have a greater degree of choice now. I think he's trying to steer a middle path. And I wouldn't say that he's doctrinaire, but I would say that he's trying to be as open in terms of the debate as possible in relation to education.
We're talking about the 8th Amendment, and we go to the person with the red microphone. Okay.
Yeah. John O'Gorman, no affiliation. I'd like to say that pro-choice is a lie. It's a huge lie, because the unborn children have no choice, only to face the world's rejection by dying an excruciating death without any painkillers, and having their vulnerable, innocent little bodies being dismembered and their skull being crushed. The horrors and brutality of this abortion can never be overstated. And we don't have the right to stop anybody from being born into this world. We have no right to stop the future generations coming in here. We have a responsibility and a duty of care to ensure that they're not obstructed, like we all did ourselves. We were all allowed to come in here. And if abortion existed for us, we wouldn't be here today, and we were all in the same place at one point in time inside our mothers' bodies, being nourished. And if anyone had done such a thing or thought of such a thing at that time, we would never have got here.
Okay, can I just ask you that, are you in favour of the present situation, whereby a woman who's threatened with severe health problems for the rest of her life, if she is required to continue with the pregnancy, and should she not have a choice on whether to allow her body to be used to give birth to that unborn child, or should she be free to choose, well, okay, no, I'm not, I want to protect my health for the rest of my life?
Well, if the medical complications are very complex and doctors have to remove the baby from the mother, That's not abortion.
It
because
is.
It's not the deliberate and intentional killing of a child.
It is.
Abortion is the deliberate and killing of a child.
No, yeah, but this would be deliberate killing of a child, as you say. But I'm just asking you that in the circumstances where a woman is faced with the situation of continuing with a pregnancy, at the risk of very serious impairment to her health for the rest of her life, should she not have a choice on that issue?
Well, that decision would belong to the doctors to decide. That's the mother you're talking about.
Yes. I'm not talking that her life that she'd lose her life, but I'm just talking about serious impairment to her health. Should she be required under pain of criminal law to give birth to that child?
Well, as I say, if the medical profession decided her life was at stake and they had to provide an abortion as healthcare.
Oh, okay, okay, you're not... all right, thank you. Can I go to the person with the yellow microphone?
My name is Steve O'Connell. I'm affiliated with the Anti-Austerity Alliance. There are a couple of points I'd like to make here. With regard to this gentleman here who was talking about the Ten Commandments, I think the idea of equating being Catholic and Irish is somewhat misguided. I think we live in a multi-faith society where people make decisions on their own faith. So I think linking the two of those
yeah,
isn't
but
helpful.
still the injunction, thou shalt not kill, most of us would agree with that.
Okay.
And whether we're Catholic or not Catholic.
On that point, Vincent, I think if we're talking about linking that to repealing the 8th Amendment, if we don't repeal the 8th Amendment, we're going to live in a nation that only sees black and white and doesn't see the grey areas, doesn't pay attention to the fact that women may have been the victim of a sexual assault, that may be looking at a life after having lost a child that they knew would never be born alive. So if we're going to live in a country that actually values women, and I'd like to take Mr. O'Keefe's point on there being an expert group, that group, I wonder who'll be on that. Who is really the expert about women's bodies? It's certainly not me. It's the woman, and it's the woman in her given situation.
A retired male judge. All right, we go.